First we have to understand what is a constructor. So constructor is a method as a function, and it is used to initialize an object state in a class. So where we will use in a class, we will use and to initialize the object state. Okay, so it automatically called during the creation of object in a class. When the object is going to create in a class, so it will automatically call like Java and any other programming language. Okay, the concept of a constructor is same in React as well as we have seen already in Java or some other OOPS concept, right? So the constructor in a React component is called before the component is mounted. So when will it called? Before the component is mounted. Okay, so when you implement the constructor for a React component, you need to call super, and then we have to pass the parameter as props. Okay, uh, so if we are going to write any other comments, any other statements, right? Not comment, any other statement, any other instruction inside the class component, so you do not have to write that. Before that you have to write first super, and then you have to pass the props. Okay, and then we have to write any other methods. So this is the concept. And if you do not call super props method, then what will happen? These dot props will be undefined wherever you will call and you will write, so it will lead to a bugs. Okay, once again, where we will use, so in class component we will use and to initialize the object. And the second thing, it will automatically get called in the object class when the object is going to create. Then it is the same concept in as React and other Java language or any other ops language, right? So the constructor will be called before the component mount. Okay, and we will use the super, and then we will pass the props before writing any other statement in the class component. Okay, otherwise it will lead to bugs. Okay, now, constructor are mainly used for two purposes. The first, it is used for initializing the local state of a component by assigning an object to this state. Okay, and it is used for binding event handler methods that occurs in your component. Okay, so only two purpose we will use for the constructor in React. So when we will use the first, when it is used for initializing the local state, we will use for the local state of the component by assigning an object to this state, only for the local state. Okay, and we will assign into the object to this state. Okay, and other we will use for binding the event handler methods that occur in your component. Okay, only for the local state we will use, and other for the event handler binding the data. So note, if you neither initialize a state nor bind a method for your React component, there is no need to implement a constructor for React component. Okay, so if you are not initializing the state, or not you are binding the method into your component, so there is no need to implement constructor for the React. So you have to understand the purpose, right? When we do not want to initialize the state and we do not want to bind any data into the component, so there is no not required. So only these two purposes for the constructor. Okay, so you cannot call set state method directly in the constructor. If the component needs to use local state, you need directly to use this dot state to assign the initial state in the constructor. We will see, no problem. The constructor only uses this state to assign the initial state, and all other method need to use set state method. Like see, like when we are going to write a constructor, see, this is the class component extending the component, and we are using this component from the React module. Okay, so the constructor we have written here, and we are passing the props. Okay, so this parameter is going to open. So before writing to any other things, what we have to write? We have to write super, and then we have to pass the props as a parameter. Okay, and then we have to close, and then we have to write this dot state, and then we have to pass the data. So I am passing data equal to Evelyn. Okay, so only we will use to initialize the state. Either we have to initialize the state, or we have to bind the data. How we will bind the data? This dot handle event equal to this dot handle event dot bind dot this. So we are binding this to the event handler. And where is the event handler? This is the event handler. Handle event is there, and we are passing. We are just checking the console message. So what is the props is in this? And after this the component is rendering. So in the component rendering part, what we will do, we will create one div tag, then we are passing on h2 tag, and then h2 element in the of html, then we are passing input type as a text, and then passing the value. So whatever the data we will pass, we will check. So there is a button on click of this handle will get called that we have written here, and this will give you in the console the message whatever the data you have entered into what we say, this input type. Okay, in input type we will pass the data, and then we will click on that, so it will give you the console message. Okay, we will see in the lab. Okay, so now after that we are exporting the app so that we can use anywhere. Now some of the strategy we have to understand here in the last page, this one. If you have any doubt, you can ping me in the comment box and say like what is the, I have forget to understand the concept, I can explain you. Okay, the most common questions related to the constructor are, there are some questions we have to understand so that in the interview room you will pass, because as we are growing in the tutorial, it will help you to understand the concept, but we have to focus also on interview purpose. Okay, so there are some questions in the behind the scene, like they will ask you in the interview room, is it necessary to have a constructor in every component, and is it necessary to call super inside a constructor? In both cases, if there is some concept behind that. Okay, so is it necessary to have a constructor in every component? So no, it is not necessary to have a constructor in every component. If the component is not complex, it is simply returns a node. Like if we have a class component app and we are returning rendering the method, we are only passing a paragraph and we are sending this .prop.m. It is not required. Okay, I do not want to initialize the name and any other things. We are only passing this prop name. If the props have the data name, then it will display, otherwise leave it. Okay, so it is not necessary. So is it necessary to call super inside a constructor? So is it necessary to write? So yes, because it is necessary to call super inside in a constructor if you need to set a property or a access this inside constructor. If in your component you need to call super. Okay, so it is necessary to call super inside method in the constructor, because we are setting the value, right? This dot, what we have to write, this dot state, and then we have to pass the data. But we are doing wrong thing here. See what we have seen in the last lecture. See here, I have told you before, if you are going to initialize the state of the data, what you have to write in the constructor, and we have to pass the parameterized props, and inside the curly braces you have to write first super props, and then you have to write this dot state, and then we have to initialize the data, right? And this is the event handler that we'll already discussed. So in that scenario, what we have to do, we have to write the first constructor, and then we have to pass the props. After that we have to pass the state sorry, super, and then we have to pass the props, and then we have to use this dot state, and then we have to pass we have to set the data, right? So it is not allowed before super. Okay, finally, so when you run this code, so you will get an error saying this is not allowed before super. So if you need to access the super props inside the constructor, you need to call super props. Okay, okay, good. Now arrow function, there is a concept of arrow functions when ES6 came, right? So this is a new feature of ES6 as standard. If you need to use arrow function, it is not necessary to bind an event to this. So here the scope of this is a global and not limited to any calling function. So if you are using arrow function, there is no need to bind this inside the constructor. So first of all, I will tell you that arrow function is a ES6 standard. If you do not have understanding of ES6 standard, you will go to my programmingscript.com and we have the tutorial there. You can understand basic programs are there. Okay, so if you need to use arrow function, so it is necessary to bind any event to this. So if you want to use arrow function in the in your project or in the component side, so you have to bind. Yeah, it is not necessary to bind any event to this. Okay, so here the scope of this is a global. We will use for the global purpose and not limited to any calling function. Sure. And if you are not using arrow function, there is no need to bind this inside the constructor. So let's understand from here. So we have to import first this one, and then we have a class component is app, and inside that we are going to write constructor. Then we are passing super props, and then we are setting the state, and then we have the handle event. If you want to write here, so this is the handle event, and then what we are doing here, we are in the rendering side, we are writing a one div tag, then h2 tag, then we are taking one input, and we are adding setting the state this state dot data, and on click we are calling this the handle event, and handle event will get called, and if we have any data inside this in the input tag, it will display, right? So we are what we are doing, we are we are assigning directly to through the this one, what we can say, arrow function. In the last lecture, what you have seen there, we are not using the arrow function here, right? We are not using the arrow function. We are setting this dot handle event, then we are binding the data, and we are calling this dot handle event directly, right? But if you are writing through the arrow function, you do not need to worry about to bind. Okay, you do not need to worry. Like we have the we have binded this one, so this is not required while using the arrow function here. Okay, if you are using here arrow function, so this line is not required. Okay, so this is the concept in this. Okay, so let me come to the here. We have we can use a constructor in the following ways. The first, the constructor used to initialize the state. How we will initialize? As you know, constructor, then we have to pass the props, and then we have to set the value. uh, Another thing, using this inside the constructor, what we have to pass, a constructor, then super, and then so this super we have to write, right? So when you use this in the constructor, super needs to be called, so we have to pass the super. It means when you want to use this dot props in the constructor, call it as below. If you want props, if you want to use this dot props, then use, otherwise you will super. Okay, some concept is also inside the third party library. If we have a component, class component, we have to write constructor props, then we have to pass this dot my book, and you have to pass the library. Okay, so you are initializing your state here, and then this dot book you are writing for your own purpose. You can access the props without using this. So this dot book equal to new library, and then we have to pass prop dot environment. Okay, so some of the concept you have to learn, and you have to remember these things while using the coding. Okay, binding some context to this, when you need a class method to be passed in the component to the children, you have to write a component, and then you have to pass this dot handle event equal to this dot handle dot bind dot this. Okay, so when you need to bind the context to a function, then you have to write this dot handle function dot bind dot this, that, but we have already seen that, and then the handle function will call anywhere in the program. Okay, so this will be used in some binding some context when you are using a class component, and it is a yeah, to pass the props as to your children. Okay, that's it guys. So if you any doubts, please ping me in the comment box, I will help you. Thank you.